It's me again. I thought today we would talk about some of my favorite nonfiction history books. I don't know what else you call those. Nonfiction books, but they're about historical events. I don't know. Tell me what you call that in the comments. So for some of these books, I read them like 4 or 5 years ago, so I'm not going to be completely up to date, but I definitely remember enough to give you a good summary. So we're going to do my top 5, but there's more than 5 books over here, and we'll get there. But I thought we would start off with a bonus book. Because this one it's history, but it's also a little bit of literature analysis, I think. Okay, and that is Achilles in Vietnam by Jonathan Shay. Dr. Jonathan Shay. So this book basically compares the experiences of soldiers in Vietnam with those in the Iliad. So this book, it's not like a pure history book because there's a lot of literary comparisons, which I kind of said, and it's a little bit philosophical, military ethics. So it's kind of a grab bag. So Shay does a few things in this book that I thought were really interesting, and one of those is making the case that you can see in Homer's Iliad that Achilles and the other soldiers basically have PTSD and are dealing with that, and he draws those comparisons using the soldiers in Vietnam. This is definitely a heavier one, and it's very technical and complicated, but it's really good. It does its job really well, and I think it's a really good read. Okay, the next book I would recommend is From a High Place, A Life of Arshile Gorky by Matthew Spender. So this one is a biography of the Armenian artist Arshile Gorky, who immigrated to the United States after the Armenian genocide. He was one of the pioneers of abstract expressionism. This is definitely like a niche one, but I really enjoyed learning about the early modern art movement in about 1930s, late 1920s is kind of where this one is centered, and learning about Gorky himself and his experience in the Armenian genocide and how that translated into his art and how you can see that reflected in his art, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, this is a good read. Okay, our next one is Frida by Hayden Herrera. So this is, as you probably guess, a biography of Frida Kahlo. Another art biography, interesting enough. Similar, wow. So we really have a theme here with these first 3, which is just depressing, because this is also a very heavy one. But I think it does a good job of painting Frida Kahlo as a real person and kind of beyond the image that we all have of her. And it does do a good job of explaining how her life experiences and the many tragedies in her life reflected in her painting. And you get a good amount of info on her husband Diego Rivera, and I like seeing how both of their art styles were both affected by the politics in Mexico and affected the politics in Mexico. Also, I was just reading the back of this, and I think I need to read this one again because I completely forgot that she had an affair with Leon Trotsky. So I think it's time for me to reread this one. The next one I would recommend is A Team of Rivals by the queen herself, Dorris Goodwin. Really anything by her is fantastic. It's just so well done, very personable, but also you get all of the information you need. And this one follows Lincoln's cabinet from when he assumed office until end of the Civil War and his assassination. And it's definitely dense at times. You get a lot of the US politics and Civil War politics and info, but it's very, very good. And though it is focused on his cabinet, you also get basically a pretty good Lincoln biography, especially of the war years, and it's just very, very well done. I also think one mark of a really good biography that I experience with this one is when you get to the end, you're getting closer to the end, and you know what's going to happen. You know it has to happen, but for kind of a split second in the back of your head, you're thinking, well, maybe he won't die this time. Maybe we won't make it to the theater. Maybe he'll make it out of the house. And I experienced that with this one, and I think is really good. Okay, this is my number 1 recommendation, and it's technically 3 books. It's technically a little trilogy, but this is Edmund Morris's Theodore Roosevelt biography. So this series consists of 3 books. The first one is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt, which, as you can imagine, chronicles his early years and his rise to political power. And then you get Theodore Rex, which is about most of his presidency. I believe up until the end of his second term is kind of where this one ends. Your third one is Colonel Roosevelt, which is about his years out of office. So obviously this is a lot of reading material, but if you want to do a deep dive on Theodore Roosevelt, but also that era in American history, I think this is a really good option. And it's really well written. There are definitely periods where it's a little slower, or it's kind of a slog through some political facts and like super dry political dramas, but those are few and far between, and the really good parts make this one all the more worth it. So those were some of my recommendations for historical nonfiction that I think you should read if you have the chance. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these, if you have any suggestions for me, because I always want more options. Okay, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. But before we head out, I think we should check in and see what Tiny Zendaya's up to. It looks like Tiny Zendaya is reading Paris by Edward Rutherford. Good choice, Tiny Zendaya.